Power up. Welcome to Energypreneurs, where I bring to you the exciting new opportunities in solar power, battery, and electric cars. I'm your host, Sohel Hasni. I have been tracking and analyzing these technologies on LinkedIn and Twitter for more than 10 years. Now we meet on podcast. Hi, good afternoon, Manu. Finally, we catch up. How have you been?
Fine. Long time no see, but always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe for my listeners, maybe introduce yourself, who you are, what you've been doing.
Okay, I'm Manuela Prina, and I work for the European Training Foundation, which is an agency of the European Union specialized in supporting human capital development policies. And this means in particular education and training and vocational education and technical education in the specific, and the labor market policies. So supporting the, let's say, world of work to ensure that employees are skilled at the right level and with the right competencies to support the development of the future of the different economic sectors. So I've been working now for many years in this sector, including working with Sohail some years ago at the Asian Development Bank. And now what I do, I lead a team of 20 experts who focus in the team of skills anticipation and skills development in around 28 countries around the world.
Yeah, this is extraordinary. I mean, how do you keep track on? I remember economists published 5 years ago that which skills are going to be less important with the technology coming in and which skills will be more relevant. Now you are working with the government to prepare the workforce of the future, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. Well, that is always what I say is that people working in this field are never happy because you are never done, right? So the moment you understand there is a trend and so you have to correct something in the skills package that you have, it's the moment that then you need to apply another correction yet again, because things are always changing. And what is challenging now is that the speed of change is extremely high compared to the past. So this means that whatever you do in terms of skilling people or upskilling or reskilling them needs to be fast as well. And the education and training system are by nature very slow in adapting, because you need to go through quite a heavy process to be sure that you actually can implement those changes forward. So right now, everywhere in all countries, the challenge is how to actually match this. And this requires to think a bit out of the box. So it means that we need to diversify on one side. So we need to give more space also to non-formal learning, to upskilling and reskilling within companies, and to find different ways to reach out to people to involve them in a continuous learning journey. So the famous lifelong learning is really not only something that it's beautiful, but it's something necessary to face the challenges that we have today.
But I mean, the tricky part is, say, you as a development professional fully convinced these are the right set of skills to develop, then how do you convince the policymaker and then the ultimate person who will be trained with the new skill? No, it is quite a daunting exercise, and you want to do it fast, no?
Absolutely. But it's not only the government involved in this, and this is what we have seen much more in I would say, the last decade. First of all, there are companies. Companies have a big stake in this skilling and reskilling need. So they're very much involved, both in voicing out what are their needs, but also in investing in skilling. So the involvement of the private sector is extremely important, both in terms of setting up policies and pushing the change to be faster, and on the other side to invest in ensuring that also in the world of work, the skilling dimension takes place. The other actor that is very much involved is civil society. So it's, you know, it's different entities, association, communities that have a need, both in terms of ensuring inclusion and making sure that on the ground people find a job, but also are happy with the place they live in. And from there, there are different needs that come up. And so now what happens is that all those actors are actually involved. So if you want, the governance of the education and training system or of skills development is much more complex than before. But while in the past, like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, this was seen as a bit of, you know, the different parties having to negotiate for one solution, today is not the case anymore. So those different parties do different things, but going in the same direction. It's a bit the logic that we have in investments, you know, it's not anymore saying we all invest in this project, but we all invest for this impact. And so we do different things, we do different investments on different groups of people going in the same direction. And this is what is happening also in the world of skills.
Wow. So coming back to my specific area of interest, as you know, I mean, now the big thing is globally is happening, the energy transition, right? People, because of fossil fuels slowly vanishing from the horizon, one would hope so. And the new technologies, solar, people talk about hydrogen, of course, electric vehicle now something coming in. How do you train people, especially vocational people, to be able to repair, maintain, design those things, no? Are you doing anything in those areas?
Yeah, we're doing a lot in those areas, actually. So first of all, well, I give you three perspectives. The first is to look into the skills of the future, right? So it's like what skills are needed to make the transition happen. So this is the first question. So on that, what we are doing, we are cooperating with different countries to really understand, both from companies that are in the country. I give you an example. We just concluded a study in Tunisia and another one in Albania on energy transition. And now we're starting a new study on all the countries in the North Africa with UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, looking exactly on the skills in the energy sector. How we do that is, on one side, we engage with the actors who are part of the chain, let's say, from the skills development to the use of skills. We work a lot with companies using a lot of foresight tools. So also imagining, you know, the system and the sector, how it will be in few years from now. You know, in some countries, I give you the example of Tunisia. Tunisia is has made a commitment to move to renewable energies for around 40% by 2030. Now right now they are at 3%. So to fill this gap in less than, you know, in 8 years, it's going to take a big effort in terms of system transformation, but also in terms of skill of the workforce. So how do we make that happen? Then it's the question. And of course, we work also with all the players in the world of education to try to put up really a strategy on how to make this happen. The second thing we do is we work on one side with companies. So the question is what companies can do to invest in skills. And well, in the energy sector, we have big companies on one side. And for big companies, this is not a big issue. They know what they have to do and they make the investment. The problem is with small companies, and it's with in the chain, So what needs to happen is that we bring together the small companies on the reskilling and upskilling, because unless the guys who actually go to your home to fix the thing are part of this transformation, the transformation will not happen, So that is the big problem right now, is to get involved the biggest number of companies, that is the small or micro companies that are in all countries. And there it's important to involve the sector association, the Chamber of Commerce, because they can give services to those companies and bring those needs together. Otherwise it will not happen. A small company doesn't have the strength to invest in skilling, upskilling. It doesn't have the strength to think about what are the skills that I need in 3 years from now. So somebody needs to take care of that service. And that service is something that the intermediaries or the public sector can really jump in. So we work a lot with the intermediaries to make sure that the skill dimension in any of the sectors, but in particular, as regard the green transition and the transition to renewable energy, is taken care of. The third thing we do is to work with training providers. Now here there are many new things that are happening, and the way the world was looking at vocational education and training, let's say 20 years ago, is not there anymore. In the past, vocational education and training was looked at as the little sister of the education system. The sector where those that could not make it through the education and training would then finally go. But it's not the case anymore, because the investment, the level of technology, the level of innovation of that sector has been really amazing. And now we are working a lot with vet schools, and in particular, we are pushing schools to become centers of excellence, which means that they really put the innovation and also the work with the ecosystem around them, with companies, with higher education providers, with innovation centers, with startup. They become catalyzers of all those chains of thinking. And so the vet schools becomes an incubator itself. And this means that students have the possibility to access very quickly to the labor market while they are still in education and training. And by the time they transit to the labor market, they are definitely more ready to go. And by this, we also make vet more attractive, because young people love that. So we are able to actually give a different message about this sector, which is not, well, come here because you will not make it through the other path, but come here because it's cool. And, young people like that. So that's working.
Okay. Well, you say that the young people like that in school, of course, they're moving on. But as people living longer, as the old people retirement age getting extended and extended, what incentives are there for a sort of someone in a mid profession to learn something new? No, how does that work? That may be the challenging part, no?
Yeah, absolutely. There are. Well, first of all, it's something about engaging employees in lifelong learning. So it's important. And we had an interesting discussion on this last year with a few HR managers of big companies. And what they were saying is that one of the challenges is to be able not to pass the message that you need to invest in learning because, you know, otherwise you will be fired, or you are old, or you are, you know, out of the labor market. But you need to invest, because through this, all your competencies coming also from the past will, you know, further expand. So it's something really positive. It's an expansion investment. It's not something that it's only to protect your job. So what is happening in companies is that first, companies make it very clear that this is part of the strategy they have on their personnel. So there is a big effort in involving employees in lifelong learning. The second is to diversify. So it's not only to give space to employees to invest in what they're doing right now. So, you know, you're working on this specific job and task, and the training is for that. No, there is also an individual responsibility in choosing what to learn. And what companies are doing, and also governments are doing, is to give flexibility to this choice. You might have heard, for example, of individual learning accounts. So, and this is an experience that actually started in Asia and Singapore, but also in Europe, in several countries, where each person has a fund from the government that you can play on any learning experience. So it doesn't matter if you want to learn something about your specific job, or you are interested in learning something because you are attracted by another profession, or you want to learn to play an instrument. It doesn't matter. What is important is that you are constantly seeking learning. So on one side, there is the incentivizing the individual to continuously access learning experience, because you know that you need to learn to learn. I mean, it's some people are really blocked. They don't imagine that they still can invest in a learning experience. And that requires a bit of training of yourself. So incentivizing individuals to access learning wherever and however they want, on any subject they want, is one of the strategies to make people more comfortable with learning. On the other side, companies are also making sure that this is actually really part of the culture, so that people have the space, and people also are accompanied in engaging with the learning experience. Something, for example, that I really like of the working for the European Commission is that in the last year before retirement, people are obliged to undertake a number of training courses. And it's fascinating, because throughout the career, you're not obliged. You are invited, you are offered opportunities, and you can, you know, play out. But just before retirement, you must take some of those training. And all people tell me that this is quite great, that it was very helpful to then make choices for after. So these are some of the things.
Yeah, but what you explained, that train the trainer and getting people motivated to take the responsibility of their own training requirement, right? Whatever it is, learn something, right?
Yeah.
But that may have completely changed because of COVID. You know, before it was only Manuela Prina who could cook a best risotto, but now everybody is trying through YouTube, and they had hundreds of hours. How did that impact? No, people when they were locked up, a lot of people went into self-learning and everything else. So that must have really helped, no? Your case?
Well, in reality, data show us that it was not the case.
Oh, okay.
In fact, data on access to learning at time of COVID was quite disappointing.
Okay.
People did not invest so much. I mean, what we know is that people who already were investing in learning did more. Yeah, and they actually invested even more during COVID. But the majority of people, especially those in technical jobs or in low-skilled jobs, no. So, and what is interesting, for example, to see out of COVID is that in most of the countries, of course, the first response to COVID was subsidies, right? So people were at home. And what the government did was to give subsidies to companies or subsidies to individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what we know from crisis in terms of skills dimension is that it's normal for crisis that the first thing you do is to subsidize. But if you don't put up measures that actually support active labor market policies, so if you tell people I subsidize you, but you don't tell them I subsidize you, but in this free time you have, you do this course, or but in this time you have, you do this internship there, you lose an opportunity, and people have actually a disincentive to learn. Okay, unless, of course, they are self-motivated. So what we know from the data of COVID is that, in fact, on one side, for a structural way of how governments react in crisis through subsidies, the skill dimension came into the picture only later. In fact, we started to talk about the problem of skilling, upskilling, only at the end of the first year of COVID. However, there, for example, in Europe, I don't know if you heard, we put up a new scheme, which is called Youth Guarantee. That is an active labor market policy that supports young people in transit into the world of work with several incentives for young people, but also several supports for companies to hire. It's actually very difficult to get people out of the subsidy logic. So what is happening in Europe, for example, now, is that what's happening in Europe is that there are vacancies, but people don't accept jobs because we are still, well, now that we remove many of the subsidies regarding COVID soon, but the subsidy gives basically a disincentive in actually using the active labor market policies. So that is what is always difficult to try to put together. Now is the social protection, which is an obligation, and it's something that is extremely important in our society, with the activation of the learning, and so the activation also of the persons in engaging with the labor market.
So how do you think overall all these approaches of your work as to how do I skill or reskill people, how do we decide what will be the future job, has that trend somehow shifted a bit, either move forward or direction change because of COVID? Because suddenly everybody become a tech savvy, relatively speaking, right? That's one. So yeah. How did that impact? Must have impacted somehow, no?
Yeah. No, it has impacted a lot. First, it impacted this diversification of training and learning. So COVID was the opportunity for also the different actors in the sector to come together in a much more stronger way. Because during COVID, we experimented that partnerships really make a difference. You know, during COVID, because of the emergency, we went very fast, for example, in having the private sector supporting digital transformation of training actors, or in having partnerships to work together, in you know, thinking a bit out of the box, also in terms of providing connectivity, etc. And this has remained in the system. So this gave really a twist to how the sector works. The second thing is the diversification in terms of learning offer. Even if, I mean, during COVID, you know, countries were not as fast on technical and vocational training as they were on general education. Because of course there is a bit, there are different complexity. Now it's difficult to train a, you know, somebody if you don't have the right technology and people cannot access to it. You cannot have a simulator delivered at home of all the students, but you can put up a, you know, a lecture on, I don't know, history through a TV broadcasting. So we're talking really about two different kinds of complexity. However, there have been very important investments also in terms of technology development. For example, we've seen a increased use of virtual reality and augmented reality, and a higher collaboration at international level. Because once you develop something, you know, the others can come in. And we see that, for example, right now also with the tragedy of Ukraine. We are working, for example, with the government of Ukraine to crowdsource vocational education and training material to make sure that those are made available. And the number of experiences of programs that have been developed during COVID is incredibly high. So there is much more creativity, if you want, in the sector, and much more collaboration. And this is really something that has changed thanks to COVID. We would have not been able to move it so fast.
So if someone was planning to be an entrepreneur, or someone who is an entrepreneur wanted to do a business pre-COVID, a lot of things may have changed, no? Suddenly, right? Few things move quite fast, digital agenda and things like that, access to many things. What's your advice to someone who said, okay, I want to train the employees of the future, and somebody wants to be a trailblazer? What advice do you give a young entrepreneur who wants to do something in training in the future? Any specific?
Well, you know, what I say is that it's important for me, for the future labor force, to move away from this dichotomy of either you are a technical person or you are a person that is studying generic and general subjects. And we know that these generic general subjects in the culture of people have always been like a bit higher, no, in the perception, which is not true, is a false date. So the future and the future labor force, and this is also an advice if you have, you know, young people in the family, is that you need to train people in both. One cannot live without the other. So we need to have people who know something really in a specific manner, technically, scientifically, and this is complemented by a general culture. So this is the mix of the future. So an engineer who knows also about economics, or who knows about green policies, or who knows about the geopolitics of, I don't know, the wood market, is much more competitive and will be able to navigate in the labor market in a much more solid way as compared to a person who has only one of the two areas. And this is at all levels. So it's important to give people this ability to understand the context and to understand the developments, because this will give them the ability to understand which investments to do in terms of learning and be able to stay employable in the labor market. And this is something we need to do early on. You know, it's the whole education system that needs to help people to actually look into that and to do that. For example, I had a discussion last year. There was a project here in Torino of a vocational school. And they were actually doing some laboratories for the students that had problems at school. So they were pulling them out from the class and giving them this training on something really, you know, applied on computers, etc. And I was saying, why are you doing that only for them? This is something that needs to be done for everybody. And at the same time, those kids would maybe benefit also from having conversations regarding, you know, the context they are in, and this, you know, the city and the history of the town, because that will allow them to understand better where they are. And we are not yet there. You know, we are still looking at these two things as dichotomies, while the future is to pull them together.
Yeah, but how will that work though? Because one view that I hear a lot, that large organizations may not be the future. It might be people will be more micro-organization. It's like almost like a lot of professionals will be short-term workers. They have multiple assignments, right? So that you pick and choose if somebody's skill can be compartmentalized. I don't know how will that work, but if that could be, then you are doing multiple jobs as a contractor / consultant, but a short duration than committing to someone for 20 years, right?
Yeah, but that's fine. However, you know, on this point, we see that there are also risks. If you look, for example, at the platform economy, you know, workers are exposed to some issues in terms of decent work and also in terms of labor rights. Now,
matching supply, demand, and all of those too. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so, you know, what is a preoccupation in terms of international vision regarding the future of work and the future of skills is to, first of all, ensure that individuals are respected in all their rights. Now, some of the trends in the world of work can take us to a dimension of fragmentation, of short contracts, etc. And because those are much more international, you know, they're not subject to a specific labor law.
Ah, okay.
So this means that there can be a space for risks.
Unless
for
you
individuals,
the international things into a particular alignment of some kind. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why, for example, the ILO is working extremely with a huge effort on new issues that are emerging in terms of labor market dynamics. But also, for example, last year we completed a study on migration in the Western Balkans. And it's fascinating to see the number of people who are actually selling services, or they are working for companies that are not in their own country. Mm-hmm. So we don't have anymore the need for many jobs. We don't need physical mobility, but there is mobility in terms of how your work is serving, interest in different parts of the world. Now, many of those new phenomena are not regulated. And on one side, you can say, wow, it's great. You can be somewhere and just do whatever you want and you earn your money and that's fine. Yes, fine, it's great. But on the other, we need to consider the risks. Because, for example, if you are doing that and suddenly you are unemployed, maybe you don't have access to Social Security, or
which jurisdiction, right?
Which jurisdiction? Yeah, so it's quite it's fascinating. Of course, COVID put a huge acceleration into this, and companies also are making choices that they would have not done 2 years ago. And this poses new questions in terms of how we make sure that, the first and primary goal, which is to ensure that each human being is respected in its own rights, is then matched with all those trends that are coming in more strongly in our world.
Yeah, this is an area I know very little, but fascinating. How is the weather where you are now? You are in Turin, right?
Yeah, it's beautiful. Spring is really blossoming. So yesterday we had actually 20 degrees. So I think today we will match that.
Okay. Here, I think in Manila, it's 36 degrees outside.
Oh gosh!
Very hot today. Very hot. Is there anything else I could have asked, Manu? I mean, you've given me an area I did not know much, but yeah, it's a lot to think about. Is there anything else I could have asked you?
No, I don't think so. Well, I think, especially for your area, for energy and transition, if I can give you a last message, we are now really confronted with the speed, because the commitment of countries to transit and to make this green transition a reality are really very close time-wise. And we are definitely not ready for it. People are not ready for it. The world of work is not ready for it. So unless there is a huge push also from all the actors, is going to be quite challenging to meet those goals. And in Torino, there is we have this district working on the mission to Mars in well, now they moved it already by 10 years. It was supposed to be 2030, now it's 2040. And the scientists working on preparing the mission, they told us that there is no way back. We're already sure we will send people to Mars. And most likely we will have 2 generations on Mars living underground to be able to start preparing the planet to welcome humanity. So, of course, it's very difficult to imagine for all of us something which is far, because none of us will be here when this will happen, right? So, why should we bother at the end of the day? I think it's very difficult for human beings to think that the choices of today also regarding skills are really impacting on the world of the future. But unless we do that, we will be really in trouble as humankind. So investing in skills, it's really something that can help this transition to happen together with the technology, of course, which is still about skills, and together with making sure that we have those environments where innovation and impact are put together in the way we do things.
Yeah, I mean, the example that you make is very important. Just in a simplest term, even if you have the latest camera or latest mobile phone, all this consumer level technology, but unless you have the skill to use it, this is impossible to use it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, cameras used to be aim and shoot, but now you need to know, right? So many options. So the skills have become very complicated, right?
Yeah. Also for simple jobs. I mean, I always make the example of the hairdresser.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the past it was quite simple, no? But now the colors, the technology that they put in products, it's incredible. So if you talk to hairdressers that are senior, they tell you, you know, I don't know if I would have made it through the school if this was happening at my time, because now they have to study a lot of chemistry and you know, subjects that were not there a few years ago. So the level of technology and innovation applied in any profession, it's incredible. But imagine how people now make appointments through the phone, or you know, they just issue things and they check things through apps and through technological tools. And this is really changing the way you actually train people, but also the things that you have to do early on. So this idea of, you know, training path series A or series B, it's over. It's over. It's just diversity of pathways.
Yeah, as my daughters would say, I won't understand the hair example because I don't have much hair, so I don't understand that. But yeah, you make a very, very good point. Like these days, in the Philippines and Australia, I've seen also that every restaurant you go, you expect a QR code on the table to check the menu. Even 2 years back, there are many people saying, what is this for, right? It's an intuitive right now that people will check the QR code, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then technology, like again, coming to personal example, last month, I was in Melbourne and I rented a car. I even did not check, and it had a self-driving system on.
Oh.
And it won't let me get out of the freeway. I could not exit. The steering got stiff. I missed the turn. And I see it was beeping, unsafe, because there was a car close by. I saw, it was okay. I could get, no, it did not let me. Then I had to sit down and said, okay, either way switch it off, or I could not drive because it was overriding many things. It was telling, beeping left, right, center, which really is scary for me. So yeah, I mean, that's why we need to keep up to date on our skills, right?
Absolutely.
Otherwise, yeah, everyone is progressing and we'll be behind, no?
Yeah, and this you open another big chapter, which is ethics with the technological development. Who teaches a car that this is right or wrong? And this is something that in education and training has a huge space of discussion at the moment, because it's something that then the employers in companies that invest in those technologies, you need to know that your employers are following those ethical standards, because one crazy person in that environment could really mess up with our lives.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
this
yeah.
is going to be quite demanding for the education and training system, but it's also a quite demanding question for societies. Huh?
Yeah, because right now somebody makes a mistake, you just say it's a judgment call or human error, but machines don't make mistakes. It's the machine, the programmers in the machine who decide what they will
Yeah.
do, right? So yes, yes. A very big topic on its own, yes.
Very big one. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Manu. It's a lovely to see you after a long time. I hope we can see each other in 3D very soon.
Thank you for joining us this week. If you haven't done so yet, subscribe to our show. Also, leave your comments and review if you enjoyed today's episode. Follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter at @shasni for updates. That's SHASNIE. Once again, this has been Energypreneurs, connecting you to the innovative opportunities in solar power, batteries, and electric vehicles. Stay tuned.